Oh, well, hello, students. Welcome to Get Ready for Chapter 1. I'm going to create a series of videos that you can watch before we begin a chapter. It's going to help you understand the chapter a little bit better before we go into it, so that when we start the chapter, you're not like, oh, I don't know what to do, as many children are wont to do. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Pew! Let me move my face down here. All right. Well, we're going to start out by solving some one-step equations. What you're supposed to do in these problems is you're supposed to isolate the variable, which means get the variable all by itself. So I'm looking at this first guy right here, and I'm looking at v. Is v all by itself? No. What's in the way? Well, a negative 10's in the way, or a minus 10 is in the way. So we have to figure out how we're going to get rid of that minus 10. Well, I'm going to create a little line here, and I'm not going to do that line every single time. I'm going to do it maybe once more and then get rid of that. So I have to get rid of the minus 10. How do I get rid of the minus 10? You do the opposite of minus 10, and whatever you do, you have to do to both sides. The opposite of minus 10 is plus 10. Opposite. Oh, boy. Then we cross that out because negative 10 and positive 10 cancel each other out. It's like if I owe you $10 and then I give you $10, I'm good. I'm good to go. So now v drops down, comes along for the ride, and it's all by itself. On the right side, I have negative 9 plus 10, or 10 minus 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. And so I'm going to rewrite my answer to make it look a little bit prettier and say v equals 1. Okay? Simple. Simple. Looking over to our friend on the right, I'm going to create that line again. And I have to isolate the x. I have to get x all by itself. Is x all by itself? No. What's in the way? Divided by 5. How do I get rid of a divided by 5? Do the opposite of divided by 5, which is multiply both sides by 5. So it's going to look like this. I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. 5 over 5 cancel each other out. X equals 2 times 5, which is 10. I'm going to rewrite it down here so that it looks prettier. Okay. Pretty, pretty, pretty. All right. 22 equals negative 11k. So I'm not going to draw that line anymore. I'm done with the line. Is k all by itself? No. What's in the way? Negative 11. What's negative 11 doing to k? Negative 11 is being multiplied to k. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 11. Divide by negative 11. Divide by negative 11. Remember, in order to get a variable all by itself, you do the opposite of what the number is doing to that variable. And since that number is multiplying to k, I'm going to divide both sides by k, and that cancels on the right. So k is all alone on the right. On the left, I have 22 divided by negative 11, so a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 22, Taylor Swift, divided by negative 11 is negative 2. And I like to put my letters on the left. If negative 2 is k, then k is negative 2. It's the same thing, and if you're like, well, why can't we just leave it that way? Because it's sloppy. It's a mess. I don't like messes. Is p all by itself? No. What's in the way? Negative 13. How do I get rid of a negative or a minus 13? Do the opposite. Add 13. Add 13. Cross u out. P is now all by itself on the right. If I owe negative $8 and then someone gives me $13 and I pay off that negative 8, I have $5 to my name. So P for Perich has $5. Look at that. Look at that. I have $5 whole. Boy, oh boy, I can buy myself pretty much nothing. Thanks, inflation. Ugh. Oh my goodness. Now we have ourselves a fraction being multiplied to b. I do not like now. Normally, if something's multiplied to our variable and we have to get rid of that number, we divide both sides by that number. But I do not like dividing by a fraction. Instead of dividing a fraction, multiply the reciprocal. Instead of dividing the fraction, multiply the reciprocal. What's a reciprocal? Well, the reciprocal of negative 3 over 4 is going to take that number and just flip it. Like that. And what that does is it allows things to cancel out. So instead of dividing a fraction, multiply the reciprocal. So negative 4 over 3, and we're going to times negative 4 over 3. That crosses that out, and I'm left with b on the left. Now I have a whole number being multiplied to a fraction. I don't like the way that looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that 2 into 2 over 1 because I'm allowed to. I'm going to change that negative 4 over 3 into negative 4 over 3. I guess I'm not changing anything at all, am I? When you multiply two fractions, multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 3 is 3, and that negative that's floating around is still going to be a negative. So my answer in the end is negative 8 over 3. Now, before you start screaming at me and saying, that's an improper fraction, you're not allowed to have improper fractions, whoever told you that lie is a liar. We are allowed to have improper fractions. And in fact, in 8th grade, we want improper fractions. So I'm going to leave it improper, just like your grammar. Ooh. So remember how I said a minute ago that we like improper fractions? Well, I do. Improper fractions are just fine. But what if I'm given a mixed number? What do I do then? Well, it's simple. Turn it improper. Well, how do you turn a mixed number into an improper fraction? I will show you, boys and girls. What you do is you take the whole number living out in front of the fraction, and you take the denominator and multiply them. Okay? 1 times 64 is 64. You take that number, add it to the top. Okay? So 64 plus 13 is 77, and leave 64 as 64. That's it. Multiply the whole number to the bottom number, and then add that to the top. So multiply the whole number 2 to the bottom number, 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Add it to the top. 8 plus 3 is 11 over 4, and since it was negative, you're going to keep it negative. Okay? So right now you should be looking at the next problem, and I'm going to whisper what you're thinking. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. So I get 3 over 2, and it's negative. Negative 3 over 2. All right, so I'm going to do the problem. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. Negative 3 over 2. 3 times 10 is 30. 30 plus 3 is 33 over 10. And since it was negative, you're going to keep it negative. Now, why am I doing all this improper fraction nonsense? Huh? Well, when we run into problems like these, we're going to want improper fractions. So what we did before, when we had an okay problem like this guy, is we said, oh, well, instead of dividing both sides by a fraction, I'm going to multiply the reciprocal. I'm going to do the same exact thing. I have 5 over 3 times n. But instead of, so what I would normally do is, oh, well, my number is being multiplied to n. I'm going to do the opposite, but instead of dividing a fraction, multiply the reciprocal. So instead of dividing 5 over 3, I'm going to multiply both sides by 3 over 5. But what I have over here is I have 3 over 5, which is a regular old fraction, times a mixed number. So what I have to do is I'm going to keep 3 over 5 as 3 over 5. But what I have to do is I have to turn that guy into an improper fraction. But you might be thinking, I could just do all this on a calculator. I don't have a calculator, kids. It's against my religion. So what I need to do is I need to multiply these two numbers. 9 times 3, I get 27. Add that 27 to the 1 up here. So I now have 28 over 3. These guys crossed out, and that's it. Now all I have to do is just do some multiplying. You may have learned back in the day that if you multiply fractions and you have a number that's the same exact up here that it is down there, you could just cross them out. Okay, if you're multiplying fractions and anywhere in the numerator you have the same exact number as anywhere in the denominator, cross those out. That's what I just did. What I have is 28 over 5 equals n, but I like my number on the left, my letter on the left. Letter on the left. Alliteration. I think that's alliteration. I don't know. I'm not an English guy. I'm a math guy. There you have it. Before I even start the next one, I have two mixed numbers. So 2 times 10 is 20, plus 1 is 21, which is 9 plus 10. Remember that guy? Poor kid. 1 times 6 is 6, and 6 plus 1 is 7. 7 over 6. Okay. Is n all by itself on the left? No. What's in the way? 21 over 10. How is 21 over 10 in the way? It's being multiplied. But instead of dividing a fraction, multiply the reciprocal. So I'm going to take those numbers and I'm going to flip them. 10 over 21. 10 over 21. On the left, I have n. On the right, I have 70 over 126. Those are both even, so I can simplify that a little bit. N equals, if I divide the top and the bottom by 2, I have 70, which is 35, over 126 divided by 2 is 100 or 63. And that looks like it's probably no, I could divide the top and the bottom by 7 now. Get out. All right, so I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 7. And n equals 5 over 9. So not the most fun problem in the world. These are definitely not fun problems. Well, at least this one's not. But that should help you a little bit. So if you watch this and you're like, oh boy, I completely understand, even though it was a little rough at the end there, I completely understand, then you're good to go for most of Chapter 1. You'll walk into Chapter 1 feeling a whole lot better than you did the day before or the 15-20 minutes before. All right. Well, speaking of a little rough, my dog over here is barking. Just kidding, he's not. Rough. Okay, that's it. Bye.